calling all filmmakers, if you are a horror filmmaker, whether it is shorts, features, or you are just dabbling in screenwriting, submissions are now open for Horrific Hope Film Festival 2023. Come and show us your nightmares. Click the links in the descriptions below. Welcome to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
I'm your co-host, Mark.
And I am your co-host, Josh. What's going on, man?
We are talking about crimes of the future, and we have one of my longtime friends and former coworker, Billy Tabor, with us today.
Hey, how you guys doing today?
What's up, Billy? It's what a great episode to jump in on. This is the first movie we've covered that's brand new, Mark, in I want to say since Malignant last year. Like, we've been doing fairly older movies throughout the last few months.
We did Malignant, we did Halloween Kills.
We did do Halloween Kills, yeah.
Yeah, for new as they came out. But this one was amusing because I started pushing Billy to come out with me and my buddy Randy. And he was like, I've never heard of this movie. So I sent him a trailer to find out that he never bothered to watch the trailer. He just came to the movie to hang out.
Smart man.
Pretty much.
So we get into the movie and it starts and I look over and I was like, dude, I told you this was going to be weird from the get-go. And that's how it started.
All right. So with this new podcast, this is a newer movie that right now, as of this podcast, is in limited release. It's scheduled to go nationwide this Friday, June 10th. But I've already given my spoiler-free reviews, and I'll kind of talk to it. But I want to turn it over to you guys and hear where you guys are. Mark, I know a little bit about what you thought about this, but Billy, being our guest, spoiler-free thoughts coming out of Crimes of the Future.
I thought the movie was kind of slow, to be honest, but it had tons of different themes. If you're not paying attention or looking into it, that I don't want to do any spoilers or anything, but depending on what angle you're watching this movie, you can have 5 different themes that I seen alone.
Yeah, it had a lot of stuff in it, depending how you viewed the characters and the story as a whole. There is multiple different themes in the movie. I thought it was kind of slow too, but I've kind of gotten used to that. That's a big trend in horror these days, is what they call the slow burn. Kind of started to get popular with The Witch and went on through with Hereditary and Midsummer, and now everybody's doing them, and they're almost flooding the market with slow burn horror. It had some interesting concepts and designs. It was just, for me, very wordy and kind of slow, in my opinion.
See, I thought it was comparable to Extents, one of the older movies, that the kind of feel, the kind of way they did the action, everything like that, as far as the horror, how it's written, how they did the storyline. It was pretty comparable to that for me.
Well, like we were talking coming out, Cronenberg did that too, as well. So they're both kind of his movies.
Speaking of Cronenberg, he also has another movie based in 1970 that's also named Crimes of the Future. I don't know if you guys knew that or not.
I did not. I did see that he did the 1980 something The Fly. That was a Cronenberg movie.
Yep. Probably one of his most famous, among fans that aren't they're more mainstream fans that aren't necessarily horror fans. They can recognize that one pretty easily.
I did find out something interesting about Cronenberg. I did not realize it was him until I looked up to see what else he had done. He is actually, and I'm probably the nerdiest one in the room right now, He is actually the, I guess, psychologist or counselor or whatever in seasons 4 and 5 Star Trek Discovery. He has
Yes,
he has a reoccurring role.
and it is not his first time actually playing a psychologist. He was also the I can't remember the character's name, but he was the antagonist for Nightbreed as well. So he's dabbled in acting as well as
Writing
directing.
and production.
So we started before this that I kind of felt like this was going to be very differing opinions. I really liked this movie, but I'm going to show my hands here. If you guys, I'm pretty visual when it comes to recording. This is an audio podcast, but I like to use visuals. Maybe this will end up on socials, but Crimes of the Future reminded me of this generation's Hellraiser.
I would thoroughly have to disagree.
With its themes of pain and pleasure, I think this movie could go down as a cult classic and also 100% be in line with, thematically speaking, with the very first Hellraiser. Quite possibly, I would say more along the lines of the movie than the actual, the book, The Hellbound-Heart, rather than the actual movie.
I mean, you'd have to do some big stretches to make that connection, or at least for me.
Oh, don't worry. Once this thing hits Blu-ray, man, I'm gonna make a video for our YouTube, kind of breaking down why I think this, and watch them both side by side.
It's oh god, I'm sorry. I can't say I really liked it. It was interesting for a first time viewing. I might watch it again because I know the first time I watched Hereditary, it was like, oh, this is okay. The second time and third time, it started to make more sense, and you picked up on things that you missed, and it got better. Hopefully, that's the case for this, but I don't know if it will be for me. I wasn't. It was slow. It was so slow.
See, go ahead.
Yeah, but I actually liked the movie. I mean, I agree. It was slow. I even looked at Mark 2 or 3 times during the movie and said, "Really?" But by the end, after realizing all the different themes and everything that wrapped into the movie, I actually liked it.
Now, I also want to preface this that I am right on line with Billy. Like, I truly did like this movie, and I would dare even say that, like, there are elements of this movie that I truly loved, but there are elements of this movie that I really, really have issues with. I think this film is far from perfect, and I think this movie definitely is in need of some repairs, and this is definitely something I could see, like, a director's cut improving this movie.
Well, there were a few scenes a few characters, I should say, that had very kind of dry acting. They, like, you've seen Viggo Mortensen and stuff, and he's got a broad range of acting. And then the one character, I can't remember what his name was just, he was very dry, somewhat monotone, and emotionless as a character. The one that Mortensen keeps meeting with in secret. And there were little things like that. And there were a couple scenes for me, and I don't know if it was just the way they were taped or the fact that I am partially deaf, but there were a few scenes I had trouble understanding what was being said. So yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I feel like this movie is really hard to talk about because I had trouble doing the spoiler-free version of my thoughts without actually dipping into spoilers, because this film, I feel like, in order to, maybe I'm the only one that feels this way, but I feel like in order to really embrace this and kind of talk about the spoiler-free nature of it, you need to divulge into also talking about the lore and the myth that he creates with this.
It's a
film.
movie you almost have to talk about with spoilers.
Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
way around it. You have to. So I mean, and the only thing I had problems with, not necessarily the sound or the volume, but there were a couple scenes that were darker, that were harder to see. And I don't mean darker like the way the storyline, I mean visually darker.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and jump into spoilers. This is your official spoiler warning for David-Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future, the 2022 version. So if you guys haven't seen it yet, make sure you guys download this podcast, run to your local cinemas, go check it out. Or if you're listening to this after its video release, go stream it, go check it out, and then come back and finish this. But you have been warned. I'm just gonna throw this out there, man. Like, I have questions about this movie. And I have questions about the plot holes in this movie more than anything else. Do you guys kind of pick up on any of the plot holes, or am I alone in that?
No, I agree. There were several plot holes, and I'm going to be honest. The ending of the movie, I didn't like it. It sucked. I told Mark that right away. I looked at him and said, "Dude, what the hell?" Yeah, there were a lot of storylines that don't seem like they were written completely, or they were just gazed over and not told full.
Yeah, like I think for me, like the biggest plot hole that like just kind of keeps staring at me is the technicians. Like, they're very sweet and like inquisitive in the beginning of the movie, and then once they get into like what's it called, the Sark machine that does like the autopsies, they get in, they're like, being playful with Caprice, and then the next time we see them, there's two scenes, and they just straight up like murder people, like, and that's never explained.
Well, it kind of was.
Okay. Go ahead, Mark.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you the theme of that shocked Mark whenever I was sitting there talking to him. I took it as the technicians were kind of being told more of that they had to get rid of the people that were trying to get all the users off of their machines, kind of like society and technology. They want to keep us on the technology. So those two technicians were killing the people off that were going to actually get people off the technology to try to keep them with it.
I saw it almost as like a comparison to pharmaceuticals.
How so? I would love to hear you kind of explain that a little bit.
Well,
more.
Kind of what he was saying, what Billy was saying. They were, so I think one of those two repairmen was Bjork, I believe, if I remember right.
I believe so.
Yeah, but anyways, their role is to keep the medical devices, the Sark unit, the funky bed, and the eating chair running, so that people can continue to use them and stay with them, while on the back end, they're tasked with taking out what may free them from those necessities, which would be the background of the movie. So the movie is about people in the future. They don't feel pain anymore unless they're sleeping. Then they kind of dream about pain, which is weird. And they have a tendency to grow extra organs, which they don't know what they're for, but everybody just kind of removes them. And it plays into the role of the story and what I'm saying, and the fact that you find out that these people with these extra organs that are being born with them, and others that are having them surgically implanted, are able to live off eating like plastics and things like that. Where if they weren't doing that, they had to use the devices. So the point of them killing certain people was to keep that information from getting out there and keeping people using the devices because they don't know any better.
Okay. I can accept that. I have my own thoughts on that, but I'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show. Because I think I guess I'll just jump into it right now. I think that's where the film wastes its most potential, is that entire subplot, because I think they do a really good job at kind of setting up with Scott Speedman and also the son. But then by the time that the autopsy actually happens, it just kind of feels very anticlimactic, and it's wasted. To me, it was kind of like the big, just the big like middle finger I felt like of the movie.
Well, it turned out to be a plan.
Yes, and that's another like plot
Would go
hole
back
that
to
like,
what we were saying.
yeah, but like that's another like plot hole that I'm just like, I don't understand like the relationship between this like basically like Cirque delay equivalent performer and this like detective. Like that to me, like their scenes kind of like, I don't know, like it felt like I was seeing like parts of like studio mangling, and I was like, where are the scenes that like actually like explain this relationship? Like I can kind of let the technician girls kind of go, but like the relationship between him and the detective just made like zero sense to me.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, I was wondering if he was a undercover kind of tech, or if he was an informant, or anything like that, because it never was really explained. It's all laid out for you to assume, but it's never told.
well, there was another theme in the movie. There was a lot less kind of through the whole movie, but they talked about um, people trying to become famous and desktop surgeries and things like that. And it almost seemed like it was kind of a shot at modern culture, with everybody doing all their plastic surgeries and enhancements and improvements to try to become famous. And you have in this movie people trying to become famous with their desktop surgeries and freak show performances. It almost seemed like a statement to me on modern culture, with everybody trying to get their 15 minutes of fame on TikTok or YouTube or wherever they post their stuff at.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. Like, and that to me, like I can look at something along those lines and like understand that, because like, but also at the same time, like the fact that a lot of this this body modification artistry kind of really seemed like it was an underground movement. Like it kind of almost had this like early punk essence to it, where it's like you had to like know someone in order to kind of get in. And Viggo Mortensen's character Saul Tenser is kind of like the OG pioneer of this entire movement, right? Like he's the guy
Yeah.
that can kind of do you know, magical things with his body. And I think that the movie uses him really well, but like also at the same time, like it felt, the aspects that you're talking about, Mark, it feels like it was kind of like very punk, essentially is what I'm trying to say.
It felt more like that. How do you phrase it? Um, that pretentious art society and performing arts,
Sure.
more than punk to me, because it was popular. It was kind of accepted, even though it wasn't on the up and up, so to speak, where punk has never really been accepted for the most part.
Sure.
It's
So go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
finish your thought. I was gonna say, like, I'll push against that and say that it almost kind of feels like maybe punk's not the right word for it, but like maybe horror is the right word for it, because I think you have these like modern day like mainstream horror films like Seven, Silence of the Lambs, Scream, that have really made a impact onto like culture, and it's been memed. Psycho's another great example of that. But then you get into like the like the nitty gritty of the genre, and you start to see weird things in the genre like Tusk and Human Centipede. And you know, to the larger accepting audience, you know, at the mainstream, like they don't kind of accept you for that, but you're accepted among the community that also likes that kind of stuff. And I think that that's the community that we're really seeing being embraced with Cronenberg's latest vision, is that here you have people that the general population, I feel like, really wouldn't understand a guy sewing his eyes shut and his mouth shut, but like dancing with like ears all over his body. Like, I don't think that would be something that's really accepted in this culture. But here you have a group of people that thrive on body mortification, and to the point where it's almost seductive, and they've kind of accepted and embraced these people for who they really are.
And if you're comparing it to horror, I mean, just look at our podcasts and everything we've covered. We've covered classics, underground stuff, the original Wicker Man, and it's such a variety of things. And most horror fans are just, when you really meet a real horror fan, they're just consumed by the whole topic, almost in every aspect.
And I don't necessarily want to say the quote unquote real horror fan, because I feel like that
Well,
alienates people that are just getting into the genre, because I went through a bunch of that stuff when I first started getting into the horror, and people alienated me and ostracized me and were super toxic because I didn't grow up on that stuff. Like, I can't control the environment that I grew up in, a conservative Christian household. Like, that's out of my hands. And so I don't want anyone hearing this being alienated by that.
well,
Like,
you know what I was trying to say, though.
I know you because I know your heart, but I want to clarify for listeners that they might be like, oh man, this guy's such a pretentious a-hole. Like, I'm turning this podcast off and unsubscribing. No, like I don't want people to feel ostracized or alienated. Like, I want people to feel accepted.
But you get what I'm saying, though.
I do.
What were you going to say, Billy?
Well, I said that he could be an a-hole, but he's not trying to put anybody aside or anything. That's just his personality.
That's just, yeah, he's known me long enough to know that I'm just an asshole to everybody. So it's just
This is true.
It's just me. I give Josh crap all the time about some of the movies. He's like, this is my first viewing. I'm like, how?
Look, man, look. Valentine was a fun episode. Let me just say that.
Oh God, that was more of why. That was why more than anything else.
You know what? I might just watch it tonight after we get done recording while I edit this episode.
But no, I want to build on something you said. You said about the seduction and everything. It's not hidden in this movie at all. It is full front in front of you. And I compared it to BDSM to Mark as soon as it started happening. I'm like, dude, that's just basically what it is right there in front of you.
Yeah, and so this is kind of where my thought process of comparing it to Hellraiser comes from, is because when you look at the sequences of the body modification that is being done in this, and the zipper scene's a great sequence where they've announced this it's like an inner beauty pageant, and basically, like what Mark was saying earlier, is that like the people that can grow these extra organs, and like they're essentially tattooed through these machines, then they kind of through art kind of extract these pieces, and they let them kind of speak for themselves, similarly to how an artist would like paint a canvas and do Picasso work and stuff like that. But like there's a part in there where like she unzips him this like fresh wound and like literally starts making out with it, and like there's so many sequences in this where like it's very sexualized, where so much so where the catchphrase of this movie is surgery is the new sex. And that to me is kind of like, if you've ever read Hellbound-Heart or you've seen Hellraiser, you know that the protagonist Frank is kind of continuously chasing elements of sex and things that are going to bring him sexual gratification. That's kind of where initially his chase for the lament configuration actually comes from, is that desire and that pursuit to want to have the new sex, as this movie has kind of coined it. That's kind of where, and also the designs of like the Cenobites and even Pinhead like are all like based out of like 80s BDSM culture. And that's really what a lot of this movie, its themes and its like visual representation feels like.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
So I had a hard time a little bit with Caprice because she was the model and voice actor for Fragile and Death Stranding. So it was kind of weird seeing her on film after spending God knows how many hours playing that game and seeing her in that. It was a little strange. Yeah, well, it did me. It was like, dude, it's Fragile. Why it's Fragile? Oh yeah, she's an actress, not just a voice actress. But I don't know. I think it's a stretch to make that connection between Hellraiser and this movie. I really do. And part of it is because this is where humanity has evolved to a point that they really don't feel anything. And Hellraiser was about finding the next best thing, where this was about trying to find anything. If that makes sense.
I would argue and say that like the artistry constantly kind of kept trying to outdo one another. And I think that's kind of where you have Speedman's son doing, pushing for this autopsy to constantly conserve them to kind of grow over this, because I have to imagine that like in this society, like Caprice and Saw, like you can only do so much with body modification. Like eventually there has to be an end to body modification. You constantly have to have a way to one up yourself from your previous show. Am I alone in thinking that?
No, I mean, right now, as far as that goes, you have the general tattooing and piercing, but then you start getting into like suspension work for performance art and that whole culture, and you get into implants, which they showed with Caprice. She got the implants across her forehead. And then you even get into some of the stranger things, like complete body modification, pointing of the ears, splitting of the tongue, things like that now. But in this, it was more of trying to find some sense of feeling in a society that really had none.
Yeah, I will give you that. Like the society, like this place feels really desolate.
It's like it's like the fall after the fall of society, almost, is what it seems like.
Yeah, because there's so much about it that the cinematography, like almost everything, every aspect of this movie feels hopeless, to where like there's so many sequences and like at night where people are just walking the streets, and there's always happens to be like druggies or someone that's always kind of like looking for their next fix, or they're just not out. Like the streets are isolated. It feels desolate. And then like I don't know, like it just kind of the fact that like so much of this movie takes place like underground, I feel like is another like kind
It-
of emphasis on that hopeless era.
See, he says hopeless. I want to say numb. I mean,
Yeah.
it seems like the society is just looking for something to feel. Like we said, that they don't feel pain, so they don't have any clue on how to feel for the most part. And when they do get some kind of feeling, it's like it's overwhelming. For instance, like was it Kristen Stewart that's in this? That she just falls in love with it just after watching one showing of what he can do.
Yeah, and they talk about it in the movie. It's everything is kind of dirty and gross and ragged. Everything, the offices, the streets, the buildings, everything. And they talk about the infection has died, and they have no idea why, and nobody feels pain or feels anything. And it goes back to what Billy just said. This is a fallen society that feels nothing.
In a little bit of ways, like from a visual standpoint, this kind of almost feels like a more like grounded, stripped down version of like something you would see exist in the Blade Runner universe, to where it really is kind of embracing that emptiness, like you guys are saying, that numbness, looking for something, some sort of validation or something to cling on to, so that you might feel alive.
Maybe I could see that comparison being a little better than Hellraiser. I'm not giving up. I'm not giving you Hellraiser on this one.
That's fine, man. I wouldn't give you Rob Zombie's Halloween, so that's fine. That's fine. Go check out our Patreon for that episode.
Have you seen Hellraiser, Billy? The original?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on that comparison?
I actually agree with them. I mean, get the nails, the hooks, the modifications. I mean, I could see it. I agree with them. So you're outnumbered. It doesn't matter.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Well. I will say though, I can see your point of view. Like I'm not like so far up this like trail where it's like I'm right. I can definitely see your point of view, because like I would definitely say that stylistically more than thematically, like it stylistically it has more in line with Hellraiser, and then I would say like maybe like the thematically it has like more in line with like the first act of Hellraiser versus the entire movie.
I feel like the movie as a whole felt a little rushed to get it written and put together. And that's what led to a lot of the plot holes and questions and inconsistency in acting.
I didn't necessarily have problems with the acting. I thought the performances across the board were solid. But as far as like the elements of this movie that I felt like were missing, like I previously said, like there are elements with like the detective, the tech girls, but like Scott Speedman, I feel like was my biggest hurdle to get over, because his character was probably among one of the more interesting characters written for this movie. And I liked like the secret society that ate these purple candy bars that were synthetic. But I felt like the movie just kind of like is like, here you go, this is this information, but we're gonna get back to Caprice and Saul and kind of their movement throughout the world, and it's gonna kind of line up, but not really. Like it's gonna be more forced than anything else.
Well, his character and the people he was with, part of why they wanted the autopsy done on the son was because the son was natural born with the ability to eat and digest plastic and synthetic materials. They were medically enhanced to do so. And you find out that these people that are growing organs like they are essentially evolving into what the kid was born as.
See, yeah, and the other part of that is they're having to register the organs. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like they're being suppressed, and that's another theme I thought that was in there. It's like the government is trying to suppress them and register all these different organs that's unknown, and they really don't want them to change to go into eating, say, the plastic or anything.
Yeah, I can get that like all 100%. Like I think the film like does explain that. I think more than anything that part of the movie and like the explanation, like that kind of comes a little bit too late for me. Like that's to me, I was fascinated by like the movement of like this is what the body is growing to be. Like the son was like the first like born of like this plastic inners. Like that was all fascinating to me, but I felt like that reveal and that twist came a little bit too late for me to really care about it.
Yeah, it felt almost like an attempt at doing something similar to, like I mentioned earlier, The Witch or Hereditary, building up to that final act where everything seems to happen and it just didn't really have the payoff. And I've mentioned before with that kind of slow burn horror that part of the trick to it is keeping you engaged the whole time. And the issue this had was just a constant, steady, slow pace of nothing but talking and didn't really have a lot to keep you there other than the occasional freak show.
Yeah, and it was kind of like anticlimactic, if you want to say that, to get to that point, and then they rushed it through to where it's just like, okay, this is what happened, this is what's going on, and it didn't even give you that time to pay attention to what was actually happening.
Yeah, like had the I don't know, like had the opening credits been kind of like in the candy factory where it all happened and then ended up going to his son and the mom killing it, like that would have been kind of like a little bit better. Maybe like you kind of have like this subplot of kind of them making the candy and kind of like showing like Scott Speedman's connection to like the opening cold open where this random kid dies, and then also having Saul and Caprice and kind of like their exploration of everything. Kind of, I feel like it would have flowed a lot better, but I feel like they really dropped the ball and just really missed it. For, as you were saying, Billy, like the ending of this movie is probably one of the worst I've seen in a long time. This movie had so much rich lore, and like its themes that I want to talk about in just a few minutes are really rich, and it's gorgeous looking. It has a lot of like, you know, eye-catching visuals, and it kind of feels like almost an art house approach to the body horror genre, but that they just kind of lose themselves with a lot of what they're trying to do with this like next wave of like human evolution. It almost kind of feels like the introduction of the factory and kind of like the network, as Speedman calls it in the movie. It feels like the movie becomes something else entirely at that point.
It felt like a take, almost like an attempt at like you were saying, at an art house take of body horror by somebody who didn't know how to do body horror.
Yeah, to an extent, but I think the way that the body modification sequences are done throughout the first two acts are really good art house. It's a really good approach at the genre, but I feel like because this is Cronenberg, we need something that's weird and something that is going to be just really random. So it's like, all right, what's more random than eating plastic. All right, it's like it kind of almost feels like he did like one of those like Mad Lib skits that you've seen where it's like someone's trying to figure out how to like develop like an A24 film or like a Christopher Nolan movie, and they're just like, all right, give me something really random, like this is going to be the high point of why our like the climax of our latest Cronenberg movie. There's a kid. Yep. He's plastic. Yep. He's the first of his kind. Yeah, he's born with plastic like
The
ability,
ability,
like
yeah.
the ability to eat and digest plastic. That's our twist, and that kind of like to me, it just like you're saying, Mark. It feels just really spotty, and just kind of seems like it was again two competing visions that we see.
Well, I will say it did have, and this is one of our biggest complaints with a lot of modern horror, it did have some fairly excellent traditional effects. I will say that much. I'll give it that much. What traditional effects it had, because it did have a blend of the two, were pretty awesome and made it a little bit more believable than if it had just been a bunch of computer. So, but yeah, it looked like somebody was trying to write a story in a style that they weren't familiar with how to write, is how it came across.
This movie like thematically feels like it speaks volumes. I think one of the strongest things about it is really, what do you consider beautiful? And I think we're in this we're shifting to this era of a society where we're no longer defining what is beautiful. So for like a guy, like it's like, all right, you need a six-pack, you need to have blue hair or blue eyes, blonde hair, maybe brunette. And then on the flip side, like we want women to have tiny waists, big breasts, round ass. But then also at the same time, like we want them to like have blue hair or blue eyes and blonde hair, and kind of like you want this like societal standards of like Barbie and Ken. And this movie, I think, really challenges that to where it's beauty is kind of in the eye of the beholder, where now you can say, all right, like surgery is the new sex, because taking out the notion of not being able to feel pain anymore. You have these really grotesque but like riveting sequences of really what is considered beautiful.
Well, if you look at the way it's considered nowadays, you end up, you don't like your nose, you go have a nose job, get a new nose. You don't like your face, go get a facelift. You don't like this, go get that injected. And I think it was speaking towards the way society has become towards plastic surgery. And if you don't like it, just go have it modified.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And there's one sequence in particular that doesn't come from this movie, but I'm going to pull out from a previous Victims and Villains episode where we talked about Showgirls. There's a sequence in that movie where they're auditioning a line of girls for the chorus line in a Las Vegas show, and this guy's basically going through picking out all of the imperfections, and for every thing that he is telling them in imperfections is not a healthy way to go do it. It's a plastic surgery way to go do it.
Yeah.
Commenting on a woman's breasts, a woman's nose, ears being too high, all of these like really picky beauty standards. And I think now we're starting to get as a place in society where we're not really focused on that. So where it's like plus size women seem to be more accepted. Dad bods are kind of, becoming more and more attractive. I saw that, Mark.
Yeah.
And I think with that, you're starting to have an improvement on mental health as well, because those are really high standards to place. And like my wife and I have had like conversations where like she'll tell me as a woman, she felt like she went through depression as a teenager because you're having to see these society you're having to hear these societal standards of beauty and realizing that you're never going to be good enough. Because like you're saying, like Mark, like, if there's a problem, we have plastic surgery for that. And I don't think that's I personally don't. I think plastic surgery should be resolved not necessarily for vanity, but for burn victims and people along those lines.
Reconstruction. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's the
don't
word I was
know.
looking for.
I don't know if I've mentioned it on here. I don't even know if I mentioned it to you, but when I was a kid, my dad had his face crushed and almost killed. My family owns a mechanic and body shop out here, and there was an issue with the car, and the customer hadn't let him know. And in the process of trying to troubleshoot something, the car went into reverse on a lift and backed off the lift onto my dad's face. So they had to have reconstruction. They said if it had been like at an inch in one direction, it would have crushed his head and killed him. But instead, it just like crushed his face, and he lived. And they had to do plastic surgery and reconstructive surgery and stuff like that. So in a case like that, it's fine. But I don't know. I see it as today. It's more of I don't like this.
Yeah, it feels vain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you should just be accepted for who you are, basically. And some people are out there trying to still go fit the Barbie and Ken mold, like you were saying, to where if I don't look this way, they're not going to accept me and I'm not going to fit in. Which makes it harder for the people that don't go out and do that. They get concerned, and it, like you said, people start getting depressed and everything, and it starts affecting them mentally.
Yeah, and then you have some people that genuinely need it, like a case like I just mentioned, my dad, or somebody that needs some sort of like deviated septum is reconstruction of parts of the sinuses to let you breathe better, things like that.
And
So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, and like with some people, like let's say somebody had cancer, they had to get a breast removed. I can see them doing surgery to put another breast in there to, because that affects their confidence and everything sometimes, because then that makes them also say, look, I don't fit the mold. I don't look the way everybody thinks I should look. I want to make myself feel better at least, but it's also mentally helping them. And that, to me, I look at that as medical, not an enhancement.
Oh, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. I think that I believe that there are, again, positives that come out of something like plastic surgery. But I think 9 times out of 10, we choose plastic surgery because of vanity. We choose it because we want to be socially accepted, or we want to pursue something. And at the end of the day, like, again, like, your body is going to eventually end up catching up to you. So all of the vanity projects that we're pursuing in our youth are eventually going to, I don't want to say like deteriorate, because like Joan Rivers kept up with it for a pretty long time, but she also had a pretty healthy bank account in order to keep up with it. So like that's the other thing too, is that like, some people chase after it and think it's going to solve all their problems, and it might not necessarily solve all your problems.
But in some cases, we all speak of this from our point of view too, but you have some people like Nicole Kidman. You look at her when she was in like Days of Thunder and her early career, and look at her now, and she looks plastic. But it was a necessity for her to be able to keep up with her career in acting for the most part.
I would say Madonna looks more plastic than Kidman does.
Madonna looks terrifying, but we're not going to get into that one. But you get what I'm saying. In some cases, it might be a necessity for certain career goals. And in other cases, like I said, we're a bunch of dudes sitting here talking about plastic surgery, but for some women, it might be what they need to help with self-esteem and mental health issues.
And I can
Absolutely.
see. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say I can see that, but when they start seeing like celebrities do it and everything, and they're like, I want to do that just because somebody else did it, and they're trying to compare themselves to them, then I don't see a need for it. It's like, why do you compare yourself to them? You should be yourself.
Yeah, I often joke around with people, and because I've met people over the years in doing conventions and film festivals and even the show, and like the joke is kind of like I'll get to know someone, and I'll be like, man, like you're beautiful, and it's like it's not to be like hey, you're maybe not necessarily attractive to me, but like I think that you're beautiful because of who you are as a person, because we are all our own original masterpieces with our weird quirks and all. And I think at the same time, like there are, like you guys were saying, like there are mental health benefits to someone that could, maybe they think that they need it. But I also at the same time, I would say tell someone, for vanity. And again, I don't want to seem like I know what I'm going through. I've never had a desire to change any part of me.
But you have.
Oh, you talking about tattoos?
Yeah.
You've gotten tattoos. You've had piercings too, haven't you?
Piercings, my nose.
So
I have two
you
lip
say
piercings,
that,
Sure.
but you have in a way done that.
I have. Okay, I will give you that. I've never had a desire to physically go get something plastic surgery related. That is what I will say. So I don't necessarily want to come at like anyone that's feeling that way. Again, I would just say that like from where I stand personally, again, I think this affects both men and women, but I think more cases as a society, we see it more in women, and we're all guys on this. So like, I don't want to step out of turn, but I feel like there has to be a line where we need to understand our own value and understand our own beauty as individuals before considering something like a vanity plastic surgery.
And I mean, I kind of agree. And if it comes down to like how you're feeling, if you're not feeling like, if you feel like a depression or something, I'm going to say, go talk to somebody, see if that helps first. If you still feel that you need to enhance or make a change or something, that's great. But I really feel that you should go talk to somebody. Don't hold it in, because that could definitely make it worse.
Yeah. Therapy is always a lot cheaper and sometimes can be a lot more effective than plastic surgery, because there are, I mean, we're human error. Like there could definitely something that could go wrong in the surgery, but it'll always be cheaper. And I really love that. And I want to echo that sentiment by saying that like it's always going to be cheaper in the long run to talk to someone and to embrace community with someone.
Yeah, and in some cases you don't even need to go that route. Just a good friend to talk to can be what you need in some cases, not necessarily always having to go the therapy route, but in some cases it is necessary.
I would also say that like, yeah, with that notion, sometimes there's a correlation between the way that we look and the fact of some of us don't feel ever heard. And sometimes we can feel that way because we think that we, again, are not living up to societal beauty standards. And with that can kind of just feel unimportant. And so, yeah, some of us just want to be heard. And I've said this before, and I've said this a bunch of times in the podcast. It really makes a difference just simply to listen.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events. Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today. All right. Well, much like as we have established now with Billy on my side that this movie is this generation's Hellraiser. Let's see where it ends on our Rorschach rating scale and see what we can give this one. So 0 to 5, halves being allowed. Billy, what would you give this one?
I don't know, maybe 3.5.
Wow.
I can get behind that. All right, wait till you hear mine. Go ahead.
Wow. Let's see. Right now, I would probably give it a 1, pending further watchings to make sure it wasn't just the first time viewing, trying to take everything in, or it really was not a very good movie.
Wow. All right. Well, let me blow you both out of the water. I'm going to give this one a 4. Look, man, I think this movie is really rich thematically. I think it has some things to work on with its narratives, but there's a lot about the acting and the cinematography that I think this movie does really well.
It had a lot of potential, but I think it failed to live up to almost all of it.
I think this movie is going to end up being a lot like Men, which I don't know if you've seen yet. If either of you have seen it.
No.
But that movie is very divisive. And so, like, talking with people online, they're like, I liked it up until this happened, or it was weird and too graphic. And then you have other people on the flip side that are like, man, like, I truly love this movie.
So that was one of the things with this movie is there's articles coming out all over the place that people are walking out of this movie. People are too grossed out by this movie. I would beg to say that people are walking out because they're getting bored. And there's some awkward scenes. There's some graphic scenes, but I've seen worse in movies. I felt like the people are walking out of this movie articles that are coming out are more advertisement than actual legit anything, and they're twisting people getting bored and just not into it into something to make it an advertising point.
Yeah, it's just it's publicity at its best.
Because they said the same thing about Hannibal, that people were walking out of Hannibal, and Hannibal's a fantastic movie, but there was nothing in it for people to be walking out of.
I will say this movie is not for the faint of heart. It does have its sequences where it is squeamish, but it does have a lot of slow. It's very dialogue driven. It does have those kind of shocking scenes, but again, there's nothing that, if you're a fan of the genre, there's nothing to. I feel like this is a movie for horror fans.
Yeah, there's nothing so outlandish about it to make it stand out.
Yeah. Well, if you guys have seen Crimes of the Future from 2022, because I want to specialize that, because there are two David Cronenbergs, Crimes of the Future. Not sure why he did that, but if you guys have seen that, maybe we need to cover the 1970s one later this year. But if you guys have seen the movie, let me know. Let us know what you guys thought about it. We're gonna be back next week talking about The Lost Boys, in honor of Joel Schumacher's passing anniversary.
But Billy, where can people find you online?
Honestly, I haven't set up yet, but I will work with Mark to get that and let you publish it.
Cool. All right. Well, Mark, where can people find you online?
Just my usual nerdiness, painting miniatures over on Instagram, titanium juggernaut painting.
Yeah. Well, while you do that, I'm also talking about movies over here. Got some really weird things going on as of this episode, so follow me on Letterboxd. I'm at Captain Nostalgia, and you guys can follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and wherever you guys get your podcast from, as well as Patreon. If you go to victimsandvillains.net, you guys can find not only links to all of our podcasts, more movie reviews like this, all of those socials, our Patreon, submissions for our Horrific Hope 2023 season, and most importantly, our mental health resource library, all of which you guys can find in the show notes below, wherever you guys are currently streaming this episode. Thank you guys. And remember, until next time, the longer that you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you.